Hi, welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us today for our event with Be the Match for Equality, as well as our morning ride. And so just to introduce who we are, Texas 4000 for Cancer is an 18-month leadership development program that recruits students, many of whom you'll see riding this morning and this evening. From the University of Texas at Austin, traditionally, each rider fundraises $4,500 for the fight against cancer, as well as volunteers 50 hours in our community and bikes over 2,000 miles in preparation for our Keystone event, a 4,000-mile bike ride from Austin, Texas to Anchorage, Alaska. This year, however, the pandemic has impacted all of our communities, as well as our team. We've had to overcome numerous obstacles to continue to engage our communities in the fight against cancer from afar. And so had we not canceled the ride this summer, the 2020 Ozarks Riders would have visited Be the Match headquarters in Minneapolis this weekend. So instead, since we aren't able to be in person, we have teamed up with Be the Match to engage our audiences virtually and raise awareness about joining the International Bone Marrow Registry in honor of both Lizzie Tennyson, who passed away after 9 long years of battling her cancer and seeking a marrow match, as well as Hayden DeRoberts, who passed 5 years after receiving a match due to graft versus host disease. So today we ride in honor of them, as well as many of those who are still seeking a match who suffer from blood-borne cancers. And so for thousands of people diagnosed every year with life-threatening blood cancers like leukemia and lymphoma, a cure does exist, which is incredibly exciting. Over the past 30 years, Be the Match operated the National Marrow Donor Program and has managed the largest and most diverse marrow registry in the world. They work every day to save lives through transplants. And today we hope to both highlight that work that they have done, as well as to call you to take action to register yourself for the bone marrow registry by texting T4K to 61474, which will be below. And we challenge you to reach out to 3 of your friends and family to encourage them to register today as well, and to spark a discussion on what we will talk today about the inequity that is present on the registry. And so today we'll first have a short talk on Be the Match and what donation looks like, what you're signing up for when you do register, as well as a wonderful conversation with 2 representatives we have here from Be the Match, Samuel Hillhouse and Allison Ray, who will speak on the inequity on the registry and why it is important to diversify the registry, why it's important that, that we have different ethnic backgrounds represented on the registry. And finally, we'll have our conversations with caregivers with Janet DeRoberts and Susan Tennyson, which will be wonderful. I'm really excited to hear their perspectives and to get to talk to them and hear their stories. But before we start with that, we'll start this broadcast as we start all of our Texas 4000 events with ride dedications. And so we're going to show a short video on what those are before we get those started. And cue those up.
Texas 4000 is the largest annual charity bike ride that takes place every summer from Austin to Anchorage, Alaska, with the purpose of spreading our mission of hope, knowledge, and charity in the fight against cancer. A ride dedication is a way that we start a lot of our meetings or a lot of our rides. This is when we dedicate a ride or a part of our ride to somebody who has been in some way affected by cancer.
A ride dedication is motivation to me, because when I'm going up a steep hill or it's been a really long ride, the ride dedications that I hear from my teammates and myself are the reasons that I keep riding.
Due to the current circumstances surrounding COVID-19, it's no longer safe for us to do our typical bicycle ride from Austin, Texas to Anchorage, Alaska. So instead, we've decided to do things virtually this summer.
So we will be having our cycling events virtually. We will be engaging with our community virtually.
A virtual ride dedication works largely the same way as a normal ride dedication. Before every meeting or before every virtual ride, you would say, I ride for this person. And if you want to, you can go into a little bit more detail about how that person touched your life.
You can submit your ride dedications via 3 different platforms. You can submit a ride dedication via the Texas 4000 webpage. You can join our Facebook live stream, or you can join our Zoom calls.
The virtual ride will be going on from May 29th to June 26th, and ride deds will be held before host interactions in the afternoon and at 7:30 to 8 a.m. Central Time every morning.
Thank you so much for participating.
Join us at texas4000.org. Together we can make a difference.
Wonderful. So if you'd like to make a ride dedication, you can do so in the comments on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll honor those right now. To begin, I'd like to dedicate this event as well as my riding this evening to both Lizzie and Hayden, who have been ever present on my mind, especially as we've been preparing for this event and working on highlighting the inequity on the registry, as well as the stories of those who suffer from blood cancers.
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of introduce myself. My name's Claire. I'm also a 2020 writer. And I'm always writing for my close friends, Megan and Janet Roberts. I'm also thinking about a hometown friend who's staged this month as it's his birthday, and we always do a run in his honor around this time. And also thinking about Steve Paul, which is another person who I originally joined this organization for.
I'm Tony Edgington. I'm over the Rockies route and the volunteer chair for the 2020 team. So glad to be here today. I would also like to dedicate our program and ride today to Lizzie, Hayden. You know, we're really inspired by their stories, and we wanted to share the many stories of patients with blood cancers and how we can make a change and sustain and save their lives. So I'd like to ride for Lizzie and Hayden today. I'd like to give a ride dedication from one of our guest speakers, Samuel, who will join us later. He would like us to ride for Lily Lopez. And you can see here we're joined by our riders today that will be cycling from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. with us. We have quite a few, and then we'll mention later, but the other half of our team will be riding this evening at 6 p.m., so make sure to tune in there. But yeah, continue to put those ride dedications and the Facebook Live comments and on YouTube, and we'll share them here on screen. I have a couple more I'd like to share real quick before we move on. One of our riders, Madison Weiss, had a ride dedication that she would like me to share. Her sister's second grade teacher, Mrs. Hafner, died from breast cancer on Monday, so we would like to ride for her. And then her sister's friend's dad just found out that he has stage 4 esophageal cancer. So writing for both their families, because cancer takes a toll on the person with it and all those who love them.
Absolutely. Oh, awesome. Katie just put in a comment. I think she's one of the riders today. Thank you for writing for all of you on our team.
Yes, absolutely. That's my dad. Hi, Dad.
Thanks, Clara.
Happy birthday to our very own Claire.
Thank you for joining us, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. I have another ride dedication from one of our teammates, Ellie. She submitted a ride dedication for Camille's cousin, David, who just passed from cancer. So we're writing for David today. And we will wait for maybe another minute for any more ride dedications that are coming in live. But yeah, so we have quite a few of our riders up on screen now, and we'll check in with them later, kind of halfway through the program, and again at the end to say goodbye around 1 p.m. And then you can, of course, see our writers again this evening. Thanks, Mom.
Have our support systems. That's wonderful.
Definitely.
Thanks, Dad. Ride dedication for my great uncle, Chips Godfrey, who's undergoing immunotherapy treatments and has been doing well in them, but immunotherapy is often an experimental treatment after several rounds of chemotherapy. And so writing for him, thinking of him always, especially during the pandemic, makes it difficult to interact with family and friends, which can be very isolating. So thinking of Chips. And I have a ride dedication for Brenda Garza as well, who's right here on screen in the comment, who's also a cancer survivor. She is an incredibly inspiring woman, and we've been able to work closely with her, and she really is what sparked our engagement with Be the Match, which is so special to us now, and we're very grateful for her.
Absolutely.
Very sweet, Brenda.
Hi, Allie. We'll definitely be writing for your friend's grandfather. And so if you guys want to keep sending in those ride beds, we'll definitely be checking in on those comments as we continue the event today.
So now we'll get started with our first presentation on more generally what Be the Match is and our personal connection to Be the Match, as well as kind of what donation really looks like, what you are signing up for, what you can expect if you are called to save a life, and kind of even your chances of doing that. So just to remind you, like we mentioned earlier, every 3 minutes someone is diagnosed with a blood cancer. And there are more than 1 million people living with blood cancer in the US alone. So for thousands of people, for many people, this cure exists, which is something that I really didn't know or understand previous to engaging with the Match, that a bone marrow transplant is something that can be essentially curative for cancer patients as well as other blood disorders. And so, as we mentioned earlier, Be the Match is this organization that operates and works with the National Marrow Donor Program to create the largest and most diverse marrow registry in the world. And so what that means is they're able to connect volunteer donors to patients and ensure that match minimizes the chance of rejection of those stem cells. And what's incredible about that is that they've been able to save so many lives that would not otherwise have been able to, and create connections. We're going to show a video at the end of this of a donor meeting the patient, the recipient of that donation. And truly, some of the relationships that are formed through this experience are incredible and so important to those people involved. And so we're so excited to get to show those stories and to encourage you to register to save a life tomorrow, hopefully. And so to get started, we'd love to talk about Hayden, who was very important to us as well as to Claire.
Yeah, so this is Hayden DeRoberts, my dear friend. And as Alex mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking with his mother, Janet, who is also a dear friend of mine, a little bit later today. But Hayden was originally diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia very early into his first semester in college in October of 2011. And luckily for him, the following spring, he was able to find a match on the registry and get a bone marrow transplant, which ultimately prolonged his life for another 5 years. He did end up passing away in December of 2016 due to graft versus host disease. But without this transplant, he wouldn't have had those years after his battle with cancer. So it certainly was something that added a lot to his life. And you know, it was a life-saving surgery for him. So we wanted to start out by sharing his story. But like I said, we'll be talking a lot more with Janet and Lizzie's mom as well in a little bit. And so now we're going to talk about Lizzie. If we want to switch slides, awesome.
So this is Lizzie here. Our team got the pleasure of knowing her this past year as she started to collaborate with Be the Match and advocating for herself and, you know, other cancer patients, blood cancer patients that needed a match. She battled cancer 6 times since first diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia at the age of 13. Lizzie sadly passed away at the age of 22 on March 30th of this year. She had been on the International Bone Marrow Registry since she was 16 and unfortunately never found a match. And a big part of why she never found a match is her ethnicity. She's biracial. So with that, she has about only a 15% chance of finding a perfect match on the bone marrow registry. And so Lizzie means a lot to our team. We got to know her over some events, some drives that we did with her on the UT campus as well as at the hospitals that she was being treated at. She was admitted to the computer engineering program here at UT and was supposed to begin in fall 2019, but she relapsed her last time just a couple days before classes and had to go back into treatment. And so we're just really inspired by Lizzie, and we wanted to put on this event to honor her and Hayden as well. So we'll get the opportunity here later in our program to talk with Lizzie's mom, Susan, who we've come to know, and hear her story.
Right, so while Hayden was able to find a match fairly quickly, because she's biracial, like Tony mentioned, Lizzie had she waited for 9 long years, endured several rounds of chemotherapy, and finally lost her battle at age 22. She only had a 14% chance of finding a match on the registry, largely due to that lack of representation of that particular ethnic background on the registry. And what's important to note here, and we'll be able to talk about this with our next speaker with Be the Match, why that genetic ancestry matters. It's only a 0.01% difference in our genome, but it gives you that extra edge, extra chance not to reject that donation. It gives you a better chance at life and longevity of life as well. And so notably, I, as well as Hayden, would have a 77% chance of finding a bone marrow match. And part of the reason that I joined, and I know Tony and Claire joined Texas 4000, is that we have this platform as writers to impact the lives of those affected by cancer. And by spreading hope and awareness through research and education on prevention and screening, but here I ride for those who are disproportionately bearing the burden of cancer as well as a result of these structural inequities and discrimination in healthcare. And I think that, just to reiterate, that ethnicity should never really determine your outcome in the fight against cancer. And so that's something that we really want to try and address, at least on some scale, with this event, and by working with Be the Match now and in the future. It's part of their mission. It's very much once we want it to be a part of our mission to try and increase that representation on the registry as long as it takes to increase that representation and give a better chance to those who don't have a chance here. And so Tony and Claire and I are privileged as 3 white people to advocate for this cause. I think it's so important for us to use that privilege to empower those who are facing these structural inequities. And that's why we're here, to hope to leverage Texas 4000's resources, as well as lift the voices of those that we do today, as well as we did yesterday in our social media push, very much in the same way that Be the Match does, to try and address this particular hurdle in cancer care for people of color. And so now let's talk a little bit about what you can do and to kind of dissuade some of the fears of donation. Luckily, yesterday in our Instagram lives, which are also saved on our Instagram, we got to speak to several representatives who have an intimate knowledge of this. Heidi Simmons, who is a nurse practitioner who actually is able to perform these procedures, we got to speak to her as well. And so I think what's really important to note here is that marrow donation is not the way it's depicted in the movies. It's not intensely painful, and it's actually quite short. It's a really small, there's not very much pain, and it's a pretty small sacrifice on our part. If you do register, there's only 1 in 430 chance that you actually are even asked to donate, that you do match with someone and are called to donate your marrow. And if you are called, it's only a 20 to 30 hour commitment over a 4 to 6 week span. And you will never have to pay for any of the treatments, any of the procedures. Be the Match is incredible in that they actually facilitate that donation, that transplant. And so there's no cost to you other than a few hours in your life, as well as a little bit of soreness. And so the two different types of donation are this bone marrow transplant, as well as peripheral blood stem cells. And so the peripheral blood stem cells are actually the most common. I believe yesterday we said it was 77% of donors end up donating this way. And the decision's made by the patient's physician, whether or not you're going to use the bone marrow or the peripheral blood stem cells. But it's pretty straightforward, and it looks very much the way that donating plasma does. Or like if you've ever donated blood, it's a very similar process. And so you have a picture here of Derek, who we're going to show a short video of donating his peripheral blood stem cells here. And what we do is we filter out those stem cells from the blood and put everything back in. So what I learned yesterday, which is really cool, is you can even be anemic and donate your stem cells, because we're able to kind of put everything else back. Right. And so I would ask you to consider the sacrifice that this is and the impact that this can make in a cancer patient's life. I mean, if you could offer that chance at a second life to someone, would you? Would you make that sacrifice? And truly a small sacrifice here. Would you do that to save a life? Right. And so we're going to show a short clip showing Derek's experience of donation, as well as the relationship he was able to form with his recipient.
Son of Bill McCartney gives his grandma something to smile about.
His resume is incredible. He earned his pre-med undergraduate degree in 3 years. He's on pace to get his master's this December. In 2016, he donated bone marrow to help save a cancer patient's life, and the list of good works goes on and on.
I grew up in Westminster, Colorado. I feel like it's part of who I am to try to do things for others, just because of, you know, people who raised me, like my mom and my grandma. When I got here at CU, my coach encouraged all of us to sign up, and I just kind of did it. I remember getting the call, and I just remember looking down at the phone and seeing a number I didn't know, and I was like, you know, probably won't answer this. I usually just let those go to voicemail, but for some reason I decided to answer it. And when I did, Be the Match on the phone, they told me I was a 10 out of 10 match with somebody, and I had an opportunity to help them. And they asked me if I would honor the commitment I signed up for. And, you know, I never really thought twice. I just kind of honored it, because that's just kind of how I was raised as well. And I'm really glad it happened the way it did.
I think the thing that impressed me the most about him was he did not hesitate. It was not, I need to think about this. It was, I can help someone else, I'm going to do it. When Derek was donating, I was lucky enough to be there. I just don't really have words to describe. When your son chooses to help someone else like that is just an amazing thing.
The donation itself, I had some aches and pains in some nights, and I just had to sit down for 5 hours and just relax. So it really worked out, and I'm just glad I got to be part of it.
The man of the hour.
How's it going? Pretty good. It's good to see you.
Really nice to meet you. You all
I really am thankful that I got to be part of this, and that John gets to now live his life a little better than he was going to, and I think that makes everything worth it. I would tell people who have signed up for the registry to really honor the commitment you do when you sign up, because it makes more of a difference in someone else's life than it does in yours. And the small like little aches and pains you may go through, they're just totally worth it. For someone else to be able to have like a whole second chance in life really is amazing. And so I would really encourage people to do that.
Hey there. So we have our registration graphic up here. We'll take a few minutes to let y'all register if you'd like to now. You can text T4K to 61474. We'll also put up a few more ride dedications on screen that we'll read. But first, I would just like to make a comment. Derek's video really touched me. I thought it was a really amazing story how he got to meet his the patient he was donating to. Derek made a modest sacrifice to save a stranger's life. For me, I would have done anything to save my loved ones I lost to cancer. I would have donated any amount of blood, marrow, or organs. I didn't get the opportunity to save my loved ones, but I hope I get my call one day and I'm able to save someone else's loved one. And so I challenge you to do the same. So yeah, to register, like it says in the graphic, just text T4K to 61474. You can also, if you have your cell phone out, you can hold it up to the screen on a QR code app or your camera iPhone app and scan the QR code and open the link there. And you can choose that you want the swab kit mailed to you. You'll put in your name and information and go through a series of questions, which should take about 7 to 10 minutes, and then confirm. And you will get your swab in the mail. And at that point, there's directions in the swab kit, and it's pre-stamped. So once you swab, it takes about 10 seconds to swab each swab on either cheek. You put them back in the package that's pre-stamped, and you mail it back in. So it's very simple, and it's easy to do to save someone's life. So we'll just give you a couple minutes to do that while we read some right dedications off.
Thanks, and yeah, I think Tony was right in saying that all three of us are sort of itching to get our call. So we're excited about everyone who is on the registry too.
Thank you, Christy. We'll be writing for Mary, Amy, Kelly, and Doug.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom, for tuning in. Love all the family support.
Thanks, Brenda. Thank you, Jody.
Thanks, Jody. Jody does a lot of work to address healthcare inequity too, so shout out to her.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Yeah, and if you have any questions as well about joining, feel free to put them in the Facebook Live comments, and we'll try to answer those as well. We'll also have a Q&A later for live questions and comments too.
Yep. Absolutely. We're so happy to be
Thanks,
able to do
David.
something like this at a distance. And it's kind of incredible. We're so lucky to live in the age of technology where we can do something like this and engage so many people, even though we aren't able to engage along the ride. Oh. Claire, doing this on her birthday. We love you.
The best way to celebrate. I keep saying that. Thanks for tuning in, Aunt Jeannie. Awesome. So yeah, we will have this message scrolling across the bottom at various points throughout this event. So if you're hopping on now or later, we'll make sure you get that code to text to 61474. Awesome, and we've got our 2020 riders on this Saturday morning ride. Looking great, guys.
Love to see that effort. Wow.
And so now we're going to transition here in a moment to our first guest speakers that I will introduce. I'm happy to introduce our speakers from Be the Match, the representatives Samuel Hillhouse and Allison Ray. Sam is a community service manager with Be the Match, and Allison is a lead community recruitment representative with GenCure, which is a laboratory that works with Be the Match. And we're so happy to have them here with us today. They will be sharing more about the work they're doing for the registry, and then we'll head into a Q&A led by Alex and myself, and we will talk about healthcare inequities and cancer. So let's welcome Sam and Allison.
Hey, thank you all so much for having us and for using your platform to spread the word about Marrow registration and the need to diversify. You've presented great information, and Allison and I are just going to take a bit to dive a little bit deeper into what matching is and why it's so important to diversify the registry to give everyone a shot at a cure, and then to talk a little bit about what Be the Match is doing. And we have a slideshow as well that we can put up. Thank you. And I'm going to start by introducing Allison, and she's going to go into details about what the matching process is and why it's so important.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Allison Ray. So I actually graduated from UT in 2015. So I am so excited to be speaking to all you guys. And I'm just going to delve a little bit into the science side of things here. So if we can just go ahead and go to the next slide, I'm going to start with a few statistics. And so we have about 22 million potential donors on our registry, and we've coordinated about over 100,000 transplants. And so we at Be the Match, we're so proud of these numbers. But the next few numbers are really the numbers that keep us up at night. So last year we had 16,278 patients request a match. However, last year we facilitated 6,188 transplants. So if you can see, that is a gap of about 10,000 there. And like I said, this is the number that keeps us up at night. This is what we want everyone that needs a match to be able to find a match. And my question is, when I saw these numbers, okay, 22 million potential donors, and we still have people that can't find a match. So why is finding a match so difficult? So if we go ahead and go to the next slide, matching is all actually based on something called HLA. So HLA stands for human leukocyte antigen. HLA are actually proteins that are found on white blood cells and actually other cells in the body on the surface of those cells. This HLA allows immune cells to distinguish between themselves and invaders. So invaders being things like viruses and bacteria. These proteins on the cell surface, they can take many different forms. So that uniqueness of those proteins on the surface are what allows our cells to distinguish between self and non-self cells. And if you take a look at this picture on the slide, you can actually see on the inside of the cell in the nucleus, we have HLA genes that are encoded for in the DNA. And then those are encoded to create those HLA proteins that are on the outside of the cell. So we use a few terms. The HLA genes in the nucleus are actually called alleles, and the HLA proteins that are on the surface are called antigens. So those are just some terms that we'll keep using as we progress on. So if we go to the next slide, so why is it so important that our HLA types match in patients and in donors? Well, if the HLA type from a patient and a donor are the same, these cells actually recognize each other as themselves. So this can basically lead to donor cells growing in the patient's body and succeeding. We call this engraftment. And this is basically what we're looking for right after a stem cell or a marrow transplant. This leads to fewer complications post-transplant and better outcomes. But what happens if our HLAs don't match? So then those cells will see each other as foreign. And this can lead to donor cells having a really hard time growing in a patient's body. And this can lead to graft failure. It can also lead to more complications post-transplant and can lead to that graft versus host disease. And that can actually lead to worse outcomes. So if we go ahead and go to the next slide, if you remember, we inherit 23 pairs of chromosomes. And we get one set from our mom and one set from our dad. So on chromosome 6 is where we actually encode for the HLA gene. And if we go ahead and go one more slide. So whenever we are looking at where HLA is encoded for in our gene sequence, we look on chromosome 6 and we look at several different loci. So a loci is just a location on your chromosome. So there are 5 different loci that we're interested in when it comes to HLA matching. So the loci are A, B, C, D, R, and DQ. So you can see those 5 different locations in the boxes there on the screen. So those are 5 different locations. However, remember that you inherit one set of chromosomes from your mom and one from your dad. So you have a pair on chromosome 6. So we're looking at 5 loci on each pair. So that leads to a total of 10 HLA alleles that we look at. So that is where we get that number. When Derek said he was a 10 out of 10 match, it meant that he matched at 10 of these locations, all 10 of these locations. So he was really a perfect match. However, we can also have 8 of 10 matches where you match at 8 of those different loci out of the 10 total. Okay, and if we go ahead to the next slide, perfect. Because we have a ton of antigens and alleles. So antigens, remember, being the proteins that are on the cell surface, and alleles being that actual code in the DNA. So if we look at how we have a process for naming these alleles. And if you look at the first letter there, that it's A on the screen, this indicates the locus or the location. So, and then if you look at the first 2 numbers, those indicate the antigen or that protein that's on the surface of the cell. And the last 2 numbers indicate the allele, and that's that DNA sequence that is found inside the cell nucleus. So the entire thing is actually called an allele too. So if you look at that one, A0201, that's the name of one HLA allele. So if you look on the right side, you can see a set of 10 different allele sequences. So this would basically be one person's fully typed HLA. So these are where we are actually looking for those matches. And you can actually tell too, at locus A, you have 2, B, you have 2, 1 comes from mom, 1 comes from dad, 1 comes from mom, 1 comes from dad. So if you take 1 from each of those loci, that forms your haplotype. And you get 1 haplotype from mom, 1 haplotype from dad. So if we go ahead and go to the next slide. So at each loci or location, there are actually thousands of different allele possibilities. So if you can imagine, you have thousands of different options at 10 different allele sites. So if you look at the total number of possibilities or combinations of these alleles, it's actually over 60 quadrillion. That's that number on the screen. Over 60 quadrillion different haplotype combinations. So this number is actually higher than the total number of people that have ever lived in the world. So you think about it, like, how do we actually ever find a match for anyone, for unrelated donors, right? Like, how do we find that match? So there's a few things that are going for us. There are a few common alleles that we see more often. And then there are also common haplotypes in certain ethnicities. So that kind of helps us out as well. Lastly, there's also some alleles that travel together commonly. So this would be because they're actually physically close to each other on a chromosome. So they're likely to travel together. So that is how we're actually able to find some matches. But why do we have so much HLA diversity, right? So why are there so many different options for these HLA alleles? So your HLA protects your immune system, and this actually allows humans to better survive external threats. So to go into that a little bit more, I just want to, we'll go back one slide. Sorry, I'm almost done with this one. So to go into that just a little bit more, I think that one of our senior scientists at Be the Match, Dr. Abir Madbouli, said it best when she was quoted in the New York Times. So she said, the reason why ethnicity comes into the picture is that HLA encodes the immune system, and the immune system goes through particular conditions based on where you are. Depending on the threat, each population will develop a particular set of HLA types. In a diverse population like that of the United States, finding a matched donor becomes more challenging for a patient of mixed ethnic background. So let's say you have someone with African roots and someone from Asian descent coming together, and they have an offspring of mixed ethnicities. You have an African HLA and an HLA type common in Asian areas coming together to form a new type of HLA that isn't common in either. And although Be the Match has added nearly 2 million donors to its registry last year, only 30% of that is what we would call diverse. And so that is not enough, obviously, and that's something we are committed to changing. And I'm going to pass it over to Sam now, and he's going to go into a little more detail on that.
Thank you. Yeah, and if we could advance the slide. Yeah, so Allison explained the connection between our immune system and our geographic heritage. And essentially, different areas are under different pressures, immunological pressures. And that can influence what type of HLA are common in these areas. It is in our best interest as a species to be as diverse as possible to mitigate the risk of a specific virus or pathogen. But that makes things very difficult for patients who are searching for a match. And we saw this graphic earlier, but I just want to sit on it for a little bit longer because right now in America, the odds of not having a matched donor on the registry are higher than the odds of having a match for a large segment of the population. That's not okay. It's why we're having this conversation, and it's why we're asking the community for help. If we go to the next slide, we can see that finding a match is getting more difficult over time. The green blocks on the left of the screen show that our ability to confidently provide a match is 54% for patients who are over the age of 60. For patients under the age of 20, that ability drops significantly to 34%. And what this tells us is that as time goes, the population is becoming more diverse. In 2017, 48% of the people who joined the Be the Match registry who were under 35 years old brought a totally unique HLA type to the registry, which means we've never seen that specific type before. If you segment that out, 60% of newly recruited Asian and Hispanic American members were unique, and 78% of recruited Black American potential donors were unique. This indicates to us that that matching is just going to be harder, and that this is something that we need to continue to add these unique types to the registry. If you can go to the next slide. This is Lauren, one of our donors. She's actually from Houston. I just want to say that we as an organization are committed to giving all patients equal outcomes to transplant, regardless of background, socioeconomic status, age, ethnic ancestry, or location. And my next few slides are going to let you know what we are doing as an organization to achieve this. If we can advance. Our approach starts in the Black community because that's where the biggest disparity exists and where the most work needs to be done. To us, it starts with engagement, just having conversations, understanding by listening, addressing concerns, being present in the communities that are hardest hit by the lack of access. It's also learning about the history of healthcare in the United States and the justified mistrust that many people have of the healthcare community, and working to earn that trust back. We're going to use data. We do use data to drive our decisions and to inform these communities about the need and how they can help. Right now, only 4% of our registry is Black. And to this end, I just want to say that there's many things that Be The Match is currently doing in Atlanta with the plan to expand to other cities in the future. The folks at Atlanta, you spoke with Stephanie yesterday, and her colleague Tamara helped us with these slides. They're doing incredible things. And if you ever want to learn more, if you're listening and you're in Atlanta, you can go to bethematchatl.org and find out more what they're doing. But these are happening across the country. If we can go to the next slide. Be The Match started as just a registry, but we quickly realized that transplant patients need more than just donors. There's a lot of hurdles to jump over on this journey. And so a few other things that we do is our commitment to growing the cord blood registry. Cord blood is donated from after childbirth. This is usually discarded, but these cord blood cells are really rich for stem cells. Oftentimes, if a cancer patient is unable to find a match on the adult registry, a cord blood transplant can be a viable option. So we continue our work with St. David's in Austin and with hospitals throughout the state of Texas to grow the cord blood bank. There's also very significant financial barriers to transplant that might exist. And in 2019, Be The Match provided almost $5 million to patients to help either fill the gap left by insurance or to fund transplants for patients that had no insurance. We have a team, a patient advocacy team, who fights every day to ensure that everyone has access to care. In 2019, the PACT Act was signed into law, which increased coverage under Medicare. And in 2020, this team will continue at the state and federal level to expand Medicaid coverage for transplants and clinical trials. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is our efforts to minimize the time to transplant. Every day a cancer patient is waiting for their match is another day that they're spending in the hospital, another set of bills. We are working with our donors to get them ready to donate before they're even asked by the transplant center. This speed to transplant will help outcomes for patients as well as mitigate some of the financial burden that comes with a marrow transplant. If we can go to the next slide, I just want to say once again, thank you to Texas 4000, specifically to Tony, Alex, and Claire. Claire, happy birthday. I know that there's some parents joining us on this stream, and I want to tell you that I am floored by your children. They are incredible. The work that they do every day to help people in need, it astounds me. The reason that I work with Be the Match is because I was a marrow donor in 2011. And the reason that I was a donor is because someone had this conversation with me. The conversations that you're having with your peers and with the world are going to lead to more stories like mine and my recipients. And I'm just very, very grateful. And with that, we're happy to take any questions. But yeah, thank you once again for providing this platform.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It really was so informative and easy to digest, I thought. Very cool to both hear from you about why background is important, as well as what we can do both at an organizational level and an individual level to change it. So we were going to kind of kick off a Q&A. And if any of the audience has questions, feel free to put those in the Facebook chat and we'll do our best to answer them. But Tony has our first question for you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks for that great presentation, y'all. It was fantastic. Yeah, I had yet to learn about how the biology works behind marrow and blood stem cell transplants. So that was great to hear at a more digestible realm. I'm a STEM major, but I still have no clue about biology. It was pretty easy to understand. So yeah, we feel free, like Alex said, viewers, to put your questions or comments in the Facebook Live or YouTube comment sections, and we will put them up on screen to answer. To start off, we have a question. We would like to hear Samuel or Allison answer, and it is, for those of us who don't know, could you explain what healthcare disparities are in general?
Yeah. I mean, very simply, it's just a gap of healthcare outcomes between populations. You talked to one of our donors, Idosa, and highlighted his story yesterday, and I was reading his words, and something that stuck with me that I think does a good job of explaining that is he said that the reason that he donated is because cancer doesn't discriminate, but medicine does. And I think he said it best. It is that gap between outcomes that exists. And it is certainly one that exists in all medicine, and Be the Match is not immune to that.
Definitely, and it isn't just race. You know, we were talking about ethnicity and race here for the bone marrow registry, but disparities can also be brought about based on someone's age or their sex or their sexuality or their disabilities or socioeconomic status. And some of those we'll actually be getting into in our second and third part series of our talks with Texas 4000. But this talk today was kind of focused on disparities in the bone marrow registry and what we can do to fix that. So yeah, I mean, it's not singular to blood cancers, and its disparities exist throughout all of medicine. And so we have to make sure to tackle them from all angles. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for the work you do.
No, yeah.
Right, so follow-up question. How specifically does that inequity find its way into the registry? I know you spoke a little bit about it, but if you could speak a little bit more.
Yeah, so there's several factors. Certainly, right now, the biggest health disparity in modern medicine is that gap between access to transplant between a white patient and a Black patient. That's what we talk about the most because it is such a serious problem. But there's socioeconomic problems, and we've tried to do our best to combat those things, trying to provide access and take away that financial barrier. Also, one is just access to information. and that's another area that Be the Match takes a lot of pride in, is providing access to information. So if you are someone battling cancer or a caregiver, we offer one-on-one support to help you navigate this new life. We can put you in touch with somebody who's gone through it, and we also have, all the resources available to share with someone on their journey.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I know we point out like the 4% of the registry is made up of African Americans, but also, mixed race. As we talk about that, it's even harder to find matches for people of mixed race. And as we become more diverse, this continues, to kind of we're keeping up with that and keeping up with finding matches for everyone.
And one more thing, if these financial barriers also exist for donors. And so as you mentioned, Alex, there is no cost to donating. Mm-hmm. Be the Match covers everything that we can think of. We try to help with every obstacle. So if you have to miss work, we can do wage reimbursements. We'll pay for gas, travel, whether it's flight or car, hotel. If you need a cat sitter, we can provide that. Really try to put our donors in the best position that, possible, so that it can be as easy for them to make this time sacrifice.
Yes, that's exactly how, Be the Match tries to address the socioeconomic differences of patient and donors is paying for those expenses. So this is very helpful.
We have a quick audience question. My dad is asking if you are able to donate with a deep vein blood clot, or why you can't if that is not true.
Yes, so thank you for the question. And there are some medical issues that would keep you from donating, and most of those are for the donor safety. If there is anything that could possibly put you at risk, we're going to defer you from the registry, just because that is not a risk that we can take. There are some things that are for the recipient's risk, but most of the things, it's because our doctors have told us that would increase the risk of donation. And that's not something that we're not going to ask you to be in that situation.
Absolutely. So there are a few instances where, like anemia, I learned yesterday, is it's okay to donate if you have anemia, but there's a few, medications that would preclude you from donating, or probably blood disorder, or like a clotting disorder, that type of thing. Right.
Mm-hmm. And when you join the registry, there's a pretty short health history screening that asks some pretty broad questions. If you were to be a perfect match for somebody, we provide a physical, we do blood work. When I was a donor, it was the most comprehensive physical I had. I was in college and I hadn't been to the doctor in a few years. So our donor safety is a real priority for us. So we're going to make sure that that every box gets checked and that you're healthy to donate before we ask you to.
Yeah, so there are definitely some requirements for joining the registry, but I think another common misconception that we get is like, you can't donate blood after you get a tattoo. And so a lot of people think we can't join the registry, like if I've gotten a tattoo recently, but that's another one of those things that you are actually allowed to join the registry, even if you have gotten a tattoo. So there's just, we're a little bit different than the blood donation requirements. So if you're interested, I would say check it out. Like, those requirements are different. And so you may actually be able to sign up for the registry even if you can't donate blood.
Another audience question.
Oh, that's a great question. The question is, what are some of the most effective ways you've increased registration and engagement in communities? I can start on this, and then Allison, if you want to fill in, if you're okay with that. But we're really focusing on our college campuses, because younger donors make better donors, and the population at most colleges is more diverse than maybe the cities where they're located. And so that is a big push for us, is to be present at those colleges, which our Texas 4000 riders know. We're at UT quite a bit. But then another side is just being in the communities that are most impacted. Be the Match just released a statement, and they are, let me make sure I have this right. Be the Match as an organization is committing $250,000 by the end of 2021 to partner with community and civic organizations serving diverse communities, such as the National Urban League of Young Professionals. So we realize that this topic may not be top of mind for a lot of people facing so many injustices, and we know that we need to help them with these injustices as well. So it's really being in the community and having these personal conversations.
Yes, ditto basically everything that Sam said. I would say those college, like getting on those college campuses and having that presence and just educating, as much as we can. And a lot of that is hands on the ground, like actually getting out there and just talking to people about it. And like Sam said too, we have partnerships even on a national level with a lot of different organizations, and we're, working through means like that as well.
And encouraging you all to share your story with your friends.
So before we move on to the next portion.
Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Definitely. So, sorry. But yeah, so before we move on and show our cyclists as we transition into our next speakers, I did want to clarify one thing with y'all. So we said that, there are some requirements to be on the registry, the questionnaire when you fill out to register, ask a couple of general health questions. But is there like an age limit for some people that are looking to join the registry? And how long once you sign up on the registry, how long do you stay on the registry?
Yeah, so you can join the registry between the ages of 18 and 44. And once you do join the registry, you stay on the registry until you are 61 years old. So you don't know when or if you're ever going to get a call. It could be a year down the road. It could be years and years down the road, or you may never get a call. It just depends if you do match with somebody. And basically, we have that younger target age group just because it is more likely that those stem cells, when they are given to a patient, will be more likely to engraft and basically have a successful transplant. I don't know if you want to add anything, Sam. No.
That's perfect answer.
If you are between 44 and 61, you can still join the registry. There is just a cost associated with that, and it's the cost that we incur for everyone else, but it's to do that HLA typing. So really our focus is on these young donors.
So you heard it there, college students sign up for the registry. Well, thank you again, Samuel and Allison, for joining us. And we were so happy to have you all. It's really great to work with y'all, and we're so happy that we were able to put on this event and hear from you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so now we'll pull up some of our riders who are finishing up their morning ride. We can pull up a few ride dedications too if you'd like. Thank you guys for staying on an extra 10 minutes. We appreciate you working hard. I believe we had an additional ride dedication from Cindy, who really encourages you all to register if you're able. Yes, and Cindy, we are writing for Louise as well. Thank you for your comment.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
Christopher was a neighbor of mine back home when I was a kid, and he had leukemia and unfortunately passed. He was a very good friend of mine. So, writing for Christopher.
Oh. Thank you, Mr. Turner. We'll be writing for Austin's grandfather. I'm sure he is today as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, and with that, I think we're going to move on to our next speakers. So let's thank the writers for joining us and
Thank you for writing this
cycling a
morning.
little over an hour. Right?
We appreciate y'all.
And we're going to have Claire come on and introduce our next speakers.
Hi again. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks again, Sam and Allison, for that really informative talk, especially as someone who's non-STEM. It was really nice to hear that in a way that was digestible. And so, as we mentioned earlier in our live stream, today's event is in honor of two people who are really close to our hearts here at Texas 4000. That is Lizzie Tennyson and Hayden DeRoberts, who both battled leukemia when they were young. And so we are fortunate enough to be able to talk with each of their mothers, Susan and Janet, on the stream with us today to have a conversation. Oh, there they are. Let's welcome Susan and Janet, guys. Hi. Yeah, we are here to have a conversation about the ethnic disparities on the registry and specifically how that affected each Hayden and Lizzie's abilities to find a match. And so just again, before diving in, I want to make sure that everyone tuning in knows how to join the registry. So you can see this banner going across the screen. You can text T4K to 61474 to get started to join the registry. All right, and so before I get started, I should mention that a lot of the people tuning in here who are fellow 2021 teammates are definitely going to recognize both Susan and Janet as you're both really close to us here at Texas 4000. But I want to start with you, Janet. So like I said, lots of people will recognize you as you and Hayden are the chief reason why I joined this organization. Janet is from the same small town in central Ohio where I grew up. And when Hayden was battling leukemia, she became very close friends with my parents, and she is now like a mom to me. So she means the world to me, and I remind myself of your strength, Janet, and Hayden's strength every time I get on the bike or every time there's a hill that I think is too high. So it just means the world that we're able to have this conversation with you today. So I wanted to start out by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about when Hayden was first diagnosed and when it became clear that he would need a bone marrow transplant.
Will do. Thank you, Claire. I just want to say first, just a great amount of appreciation to you and to the entire team for what you're doing. The day you called me and told me that you had been accepted into the program to do the Texas 4000, you really might as well have told me that you were going to climb a mountain in honor of Hayden, and he climbed a mountain as well. So it means a tremendous amount. So, but to answer your question, Hayden was diagnosed on October 22nd of 2011. He was about 7 weeks into his freshman year of college, about an hour and a half away from here, and just felt ill. He just was sick with something he couldn't quite figure out, and he was coming home for a family wedding and arrived home and asked if we could get him into a doctor, and literally 24 hours later, we were at the James Cancer Center in Columbus, Ohio. So he had been diagnosed with leukemia, and the following process once you're admitted was determining what kind of leukemia he had. He ended up having an acute myeloid leukemia, and then there's a number of factors that dictate how that's treated and whether you need a bone marrow transplant. And it became apparent pretty quickly. He had something called a FLT3 gene mutation. Within the cancer diagnosis, there are different genes. The medical people can speak a lot easier to it than I can, but that became the indicator that this gene mutation is particularly aggressive, and that the only option was going to be a bone marrow transplant.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so tell me about when you first found out that Hayden did find a match, and he was able to get that donation the following spring.
It's magic. As a parent, watching your child go through this, it's the only news you want to hear. And the day you hear the news is it's just the best day of your life, aside from when they were born. And I've often described when the cells arrive, I had a lot of misconceptions about what bone marrow donation even was. I thought it was surgery. It's not at all. And the cells arrive in a bag, just like you would get an IV injection. And I laughed. We all laughed in the room. I said to the nurses, that should come in with a trumpet and a pillow, like it's life-saving. It's simply life-saving. And so when I think about that moment, when we found out that his donor was available, my heart just grew a million times. It was everything. It was everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy how easy it is. You're right. It should come in with trumpets and on a pillow.
Fanfare.
Yeah, and so Susan, I want to shift over to you for a moment. So again, all of our viewers definitely know about, if they don't know you, they know Lizzie, because Lizzie was really close to us here at Texas 4000, as we were able to have some registration drives in her honor this spring, specifically looking for a match that might match her ethnic background a little bit more than those already on the registry. But that said, we know that we only saw a small glimpse of Lizzie's long journey, as she was originally diagnosed when she was just 13 with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And so can you also just tell me a little bit about when Lizzie was first diagnosed, and as well when it became clear to you that she would need a bone marrow transplant like Hayden?
Sure. Lizzie was diagnosed in June of 2011. We actually had thought for quite a while, a couple weeks, that she was just having trouble getting over the flu and that she still had a virus, and we needed to figure out why it was doing something weird until she had a bone marrow biopsy, and it showed that she had ALL, leukemia. She went through one round of regular chemotherapy. We thought that took care of everything, but then the leukemia came back. We signed up with the registry at that point in time, and she got really, really sick. She did not have a donor yet. And so we went through another very intensive round of chemotherapy. We went through 2 rounds of immunotherapy. She was on 4 experimental drugs. And all the while we were looking for a donor match and never found one. Lizzie is biracial. We actually went through one of the DNA places that looks at your ancestry, and her DNA was 50% Northern European and 50% African. So she was right in the middle, and we just never could find a good donor. So she and I think that her little body just gave out after so much chemotherapy trying to keep her alive.
Yes, and we all were so sad to hear the news of her passing this past March, late in the month. And we know how difficult that must have been for you and your family. I can only imagine how hard it was for both of you to hear the news as a mother that your child not only is fighting cancer, but is relying on, an outside donor for this match. And of course, as you mentioned, we can't talk about Lizzie's story without recognizing that being biracial affected her likelihood of finding that match. So is this disparity something that you were aware of when she was first diagnosed, or when you learned that she would need the transplant, or was it something you kind of learned about along the way?
I learned along the way. We worked with Brenda, Brenda Garza, who's on the chat.
Yeah.
We worked with her a lot doing the drives, trying to get people to sign up, and I learned more as that went on, how much of a disparity there is, and that really became Lizzie's legacy, to go out to colleges and encourage people to sign up, encourage minorities to sign up. She did a whole lot of Facebook talks to all of her friends, and a lot of Instagram. Everybody that she could talk to, she did. Please sign up. Please become part of the registry.
I remember the first time Lizzie came in to talk to us at Texas 4000, and I immediately followed her and was keeping up with her story all spring. So she touched my life in just the short time that I knew her. So I know Wayne. And Janet, I know that after Hayden's transplant, which ultimately gave him about 5 more years of life, he did a lot in that time to raise awareness about the registry as well. So was the racial disparity something that Hayden and you recognized, and knowing that Hayden had a higher chance? And can you tell me a little bit more about what he did in his time after the transplant?
Sure. We didn't know, frankly.
Okay.
We knew very little about the entire process or all the pieces of it. A lot of people think that, your blood type matters, and it ethnicity is far more important. So we learned that kind of late in the game. Because weren't we part of a lucky group, We're the 77%. We were, and didn't know it. So I'm learned more and more over the years about all these things. The 5 years that he was given to live longer allowed us to help know the man that he would become.
Absolutely.
And he would, he was 24 when he passed, but he touched so many lives, and he worked on a big passion of his was local musicians and local bands and promoting them. And it was what he studied in college. He was able to actually go back to school, and he completed, he actually received his degree just 2 days before he died. But in that time, he did, he put on shows called folk fests, and they were just grassroots, organized concerts that he would put together with local musicians, highlighting them, and it just gathered steam. And for every folk fest that he did, he had a swabbing table. He went on to do an internship with another organization that does swabbing at concerts and such. And so he would go swab at those events. He went across the country with big bands. He toured for a bit with Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. There's a number of them. So I think the thing about the extra 5 years, it's shocking what a person can live in 5 years, how they can affect people. I think there are probably thousands on the registry because he lived those extra 5 years. I know lots who have donated, actually gone through the whole process. So, but on the disparity front, I just think it's so critical to understand that because we know, so we're not a society that talks about bone marrow donation like we talk about giving blood or anything like that. People are just simply unaware. And the thought that my child, Susan, your child, was unable to find that match is just unacceptable. We're, with that kind of population, we have a diverse population. We just need to get that word out that that's important. And very few people know about it. So.
Right.
Absolutely. I know that both of there's my dad. Yes, you are an inspiration, Janet. We're so happy to be writing for Lizzie and Hayden. And so I know that I was so inspired just by, like you said, Hayden was not the same person when he passed away as he would have been without that transplant. And I was so inspired how he combined his passions of music with this important
registry information and to make sure that his communities were on that registry so that other people would have the chance that he did. And I know, Susan, that Lizzie did a lot of similar work. Sorry, Janet. We're all getting used to this weird lag on social media, right? Yeah, but I know that both of your children did so much work after they were originally diagnosed and after Hayden's transplant to sort of funnel their energy back into the registry, which is not something they had to do, but it inspires me and it inspires the rest of our team. And so, Janet, I wanted to ask you about after Hayden's transplant. I know that that might have been the end of his battle with cancer, but that didn't mean that there were no complications after that. So could you tell me a little bit about what he faced after the transplant itself and how he eventually passed away due to graft versus host disease?
Yeah, that's correct. So they spoke about graft versus host disease earlier, otherwise known as GVHD, which is a term we became familiar with very quickly. And I'm sorry, there's a group chat going on in my background. I needed to be quiet. He had GVHD. GVHD takes the form of basically, if you kind of think the opposite of if you receive an organ donation, then that organ, you as the recipient might reject the organ. This is kind of the opposite. It's a lot of chemistry going on in your body. Your entire DNA is changing through a bone marrow donation. So it can take the form of problems with eyesight. There's just a million different ways GVHD can affect your body. It's really donor cells and your own cells kind of battling it out. So to a very small degree, it's a good thing. It means those donor cells are working. They're in there working. Hayden's unfortunately took a turn with GVHD of the lungs, and GVHD of the lungs is not really curable. So that's what he battled in the end. But he went for many years. It was just odd. He'd be like, "This is weird. My ankles are completely swollen." Like, that's GVHD. So it was a long battle with some in and out of the hospital and treatment for each time. And once you have a bone marrow transplant, you are, if you run a fever, you're hospitalized. It's just a tentative time. It was hard, obviously. I mean, there's nothing harder than watching your child suffer that way. It's just kind of unspeakable. But at the same time, if everyone speaks, then others won't know. So the beauty is that right after his transplant, there's this period of time where it's really good. They're feeling really good. And then there's a period of time where it's really challenging health-wise, stamina, eating, all of those things. But they come out of it. And he did. And, like I said, he eventually went back to school. He got done what he wanted to get done. But as far as on the donor side, it's a minimal. I don't want to minimize it, but it's critical that if you are a match for somebody, it's you're going to give them that extra time, and that's critical.
Absolutely. And I thank both of you for having this difficult conversation with us. I know it's hard, but like you said, we won't be raising awareness about it if we aren't talking about it. And so, Susan, I wanted to ask more about your general experience as a caregiver and a mother to Lizzie as well, because I know that she was battling her 6th relapse when she passed away this spring. And I know that she was looking for a match most of that time. So could you share a little bit more about how that experience affected you?
Yeah, a cancer diagnosis just changes your whole life. I mean, that's, I know that's kind of an understatement. The thing that helped, there were a couple of things that helped. One is that we never gave up hope. Lizzie actually died kind of unexpectedly. We were heading back into the hospital for another, the very last experimental drug there was for chemotherapy. And she just didn't wake up the morning that we were going into the hospital. So, so that was kind of unexpected. But she never gave up hope that she would find a donor. And she never gave up hope that treatment, that cancer treatment would expand. She was willing to do experimental procedures. We'd actually looked at even going to Seattle in December and January when there was, it's closed now. There was a phase 3 trial that actually was going to help with graft versus host. She had 2 units of cord blood that were a close enough match. The success rate with cord blood in adults is it's not very good. It's a whole lot better with little kids and infants. That she was willing to go be part of a trial. And then of course, COVID-19 shut down Seattle, so we couldn't do that. That she was willing to put herself on the line. And it sounds like Hayden was too. They're willing to do what it takes to help other people. So, so that her legacy has to keep me going.
Yes, and both Lizzie and Hayden's legacies keep all of us going here at Texas 4000 and are certainly stories that we remind ourselves of when we are doing what we do here. So again, I just want to say thank you, Susan, for sharing this story. I know Lizzie's passing was somewhat recent, and so I thank you for being a part of this. And I'm glad that you mentioned hope too. We can't ever give up on hope throughout battles with cancer. That's one of our pillars here at Texas 4000, and it's something we care a lot about. Sorry, I think, oh yeah, okay, great. And so I just want to mention to anybody that's watching on the live stream, please feel free to send in questions. I think we're getting some up on the screen now that's Brenda from Be the Match, who we mentioned many times today. But if there are any questions from the audience, I'd like to open things up to everyone tuning in with us now. Let's see. But yeah, I thank both of you for sharing more about their long battles with cancer, because I know that a lot of us who haven't witnessed these battles closely like you two have don't realize the toll that cancer can take on someone's body. And, you know, I saw with Hayden, I wasn't aware, you know, when we're talking about remission, it's usually a happy conversation. And so I wasn't aware, thinking about, well, he's in remission, but, you know, look at these different ways that he's struggling now. So cancer is a lifelong battle for anyone, no matter how long they battle it. So thank you for opening up your hearts with us and sharing these stories.
Honored to do it. Susan and I would prefer not to be in the same club.
Right.
We don't love this club, but
no.
I think to Susan's point, the hope part of it, that I feel like years from now that Hayden's name will still be out there and Lizzie's name will still be out there as 2 people who made a difference in this entire battle.
Absolutely.
And I think hope is the thing. I'm glad that I think Hayden was similar to Lizzie in just kind of believing he was just going to keep going. And
yeah, I saw small glimpses of both of their battles, but I think they both definitely shared that strength. They both kept going until they unfortunately passed. But it looks like we have a question from Alex here. What would you say to anyone who is hesitant about registering?
I would suggest they just ask all the questions they need to ask. Get to somebody who knows what they're talking about, because people's perception of it is so different than the reality. And that the fact of the matter is almost 80% of the time you're going to give the cells peripherally. And is it minimal? Is there nothing that they feel? Of course not. It isn't. It requires some time and effort. But the person who, there's somebody out there like Susan or like Lizzie, who's somebody's daughter, who's somebody's granddaughter, who's somebody's sister, who's somebody's mother, who's somebody's son. And that person needs that chance at life. And if they can just ask the right questions to the right people and get the information that they need, I think it can negate the fears around it.
Definitely. The more information you have, the better off you are. So asking questions always.
Absolutely. I think as soon as people understand how easy this process can be, it's not really a question anymore. All of those hesitations go away. At least they did for me. Well, do you guys have anything else to add at the end of this chat here before we close up our event?
Just please go to Be the Match and sign up.
Agreed. It's easy to do. It's easy to do. It's swabbing the cheek. Even the process of being swabbed is no big deal.
And
5 minutes and you may never be called, but you may be.
Yeah.
You may be that person. So I just want to say thank you also to Claire and the entire team. You guys have been great to deal with, and it's a great event. It's illuminating a really, really critical subject, and I hope that we, that this results in some less disparity between the ability to find a match.
And thank you also to Samuel and Allison. I learned so much from their slides and I thought I knew everything, but they taught me a lot.
Yeah, they did a great job at making all of that information understandable, especially for non-STEM and, even people who, like you said, would know. But I thank you both so much for being here again to share such difficult stories, to raise awareness about something so important. And I urge everyone, like you guys did too, I urge everyone to join the registry, because it is something you can do from your couch during a pandemic, which is pretty special. It's cool that we're able to do that right now. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. Oh, awesome. Hey there, Alex.
Hey, Claire. Hey, Alex.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it was really special that we're able to have these conversations with caregivers who have seen their children battle these sorts of cancers firsthand, and know how difficult it can be.
Yeah, that was very powerful, and I'm very touched and thankful that Susan and Janet, opened up and showed their emotions and shared their stories, because I think stories are very powerful and really can motivate us to take a leap of faith and in this case, save a life by signing up for the registry. So I'd just like to take a moment. We would all like to take a moment to thank everyone who helped put on this program for us today, as well as our social media push yesterday. If you were on Instagram or Facebook yesterday, we put out a post every hour about various blood cancer patients that Be the Match came in contact with, that were searching for matches. Some of them found their matches, some of them unfortunately did not. So we took the time to highlight especially ethnic minorities that were searching for matches and hear their stories and lift their voices. So if you didn't get a chance to look, you can go back on our Instagram and Facebook and check out those stories. There's some great videos and graphics to inform you. I would like to take a moment to thank all the people behind the scenes that helped us put on this event. So our writers, Katie, Emily, Yash, Anna L, along with Brenda with Be the Match. She wasn't on screen today, but she was very helpful, and we've been working with her for a while. I'm sure in her comments below, and several of us mentioned her before, and we're very thankful for her. And I'd also like to thank everyone who submitted their stories to us and shared their stories with us, including Susan and Janet, but all the other students like Doza, and the speakers we had with the event yesterday on our live feed. Everyone who shared their stories with us and were able to share, we thank you for doing that. So that's all we have for this afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to join our evening broadcast at 5 p.m. where we'll hear from Brent's Place. It's the long-term home in Denver, Colorado for children and families with cancer and other life-threatening illnesses. And then our riders will hop on their bikes at 6 p.m. for an hour of cycling. And so make sure to tune in then. So we'll see you then, and everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you, guys. Swap those.
Don't forget to register.
Text T4K 61474. All right, thank you.